Hi friends. So February 2nd, which is tomorrow, will be Groundhog Day. And Groundhog Day is a little known holiday that is a day that is special as far as the weather goes, because there's a little town in Pennsylvania that looks for a very particular groundhog on February 2nd early in the morning, and they watch to see what happens when he pops his little head out of his burrow in the morning. And there's a legend that says if he sees his shadow and scurries back down into his burrow, that we'll have 6 more weeks of winter. If he does not see his shadow, that spring is around the corner. So, as you know from a lot of the talk we've had in the classroom, a lot of depends on the weather to see whether or not he will see a shadow. So what do you think will happen tomorrow? Think about it. I'd like to read to you 2 stories. One is called It's Your Day, Gretchen Groundhog, and the other one is called Bear Shadow. And I'd also like to talk to you a little bit about shadows. So I'm going to start first with the Groundhog Day story. Gretchen Groundhog, It's Your Day. The author of this story is Abby Levine. It was a dark and snowy night. Gretchen Groundhog sat in her burrow worrying. In a few days, it would be February 2nd when the world would be watching the little town of Piccadilly. On that day, for the first time, Gretchen would step from her burrow to stand before the TV cameras, newspaper reporters, tourists, all the townsfolks, and a brass band, and everyone would be waiting to see if Gretchen saw her shadow. For as long as she could remember, it had been Great Uncle Gus who searched for his shadow before the anxious crowd. If he saw it, there would be a roar of disappointment, for this meant winter would last 6 more dreary weeks. The band would play slow, sad music, and Gus would trudge back to his burrow. If there was no shadow, the band would play a lively tune and everyone would hug and cheer. Spring would be around the corner. But now, Great Uncle Gus was too old. It was up to Gretchen, his only relative, to carry on. I can't do it, Gretchen told her great uncle. I'm just too shy. I can't stand there with everyone looking at me. You can do it, said Great Uncle Gus. The first time is always the hardest, when Gretchen knew she could not go out. Gretchen's not going out, the news flashed through Piccadilly. What will we do? The townsfolk asked each other. On January 30th, there was a story about Gretchen on the front of the Post. Piccadilly puzzled, the headline said. The story continued. There's always been a groundhog in Piccadilly, but this year, it seemed, Gretchen Groundhog would not go out. How will we plan if we do not know when winter will end? The townsfolk stopped Gretchen on the street. They peppered her with questions. Should we buy more salt to put on icy roads? Asked the mayor. A father asked, shall I chop more wood for my family? When will the bear stop hibernating? Asked the little boy. Please, everyone begged, please, dear Gretchen, go out on Groundhog Day and tell us when winter will end. But Gretchen only shook her head. On January 31st, Gretchen did a little cheery fire, but it did not help her mood. All day, the doorbell chimed, the phone rang, email erupted, and urgent letters plopped through the mail slot. Gretchen felt terrible. It seemed like the longest day of her life. On February 1st, the town was in an uproar. Tourists filled the motels. In front of Gretchen's burrow, carpenters were building wooden stands for the crowd. The TV crews had arrived, and the band was practicing with squawky sounds. Groundhog Day was only hours away. Piccadilly panicked, read the Post. Soon the eyes of the world will be upon us. What will happen if Gretchen does not go out? Knock, knock, knock. 3 townfolk were waiting when Gretchen opened her door. You must try, Gretchen, said the town historian. There has always been a Groundhog Day in Piccadilly. Do, Gretchen. I'll stand beside you, said the chief police. I'll make you famous, said the editor of the Post. But Gretchen only shook her head. All afternoon and all evening, visitors came. Knock, knock, knock. Gretchen, are you there? Knock, knock, knock. Gretchen! That night, weary and sad, Gretchen fell asleep in her rocking chair. But she heard the townsfolk even in her dreams. Knock, knock, knock. Please, Gretchen, open the door. Gretchen awoke, but the knocking did not stop. She hurried to the door and looked out the peephole. There, on the moonlit snow, stood a little girl. It was Hester, the town's historian's daughter. May I come in? Hester asked. Gretchen opened the door. She helped Hester take off her coat, soggy mittens, wet boots, and her muffler. I won't stay long, Hester said. I wanted you to see these. I found them while I was helping my mother. She held out a wooden box with some yellowed pieces of paper in it. Gretchen could see that they had old-fashioned writing on them. What is this? Gretchen asked. Records from our town history, explained Hester. While Great-Uncle Gus made cups of steaming cocoa, Gretchen studied the first piece of paper. Tomorrow, I must go out, it read, to stand before the Pilgrims and the Indians. I am greatly afeared, and it was signed by Goody Groundhog. Gretchen was amazed. Goody Groundhog lived a long time ago. She came to America on the Mayflower before there was even a Piccadilly. My mother says Goody told everyone the second winter would be better than the first, says Hester, and they were glad. Gretchen leafed through the papers. Here's one by George Groundhog at Valley Forge, she exclaimed. He says, I'm afraid to go out, but I shall. The winter has been long and hard, and the soldiers must know what will be. My mother says George told them the winter would go on a long time, says Hester. Everyone was very sad. As Gretchen read through the papers, she became more and more excited. There was a page from General Grant, who had fought in the Civil War, and Jean Groundhog, the tough cowboy, and Gloria Groundhog, who became a movie star. They were all afraid to go out, says Gretchen. She read the last piece of paper. I'm scared, but tomorrow I will try to go out, it said. It was signed by Gus Groundhog. You? Said Gretchen to Great-Uncle Gus. Her great-uncle looked surprised. Then a dreamy look came into his eyes. It was so long ago, I had forgotten, he said. Now I remember. I couldn't eat or sleep the night before. What happened then? Asked Gretchen. My great-uncle Grover helped me, said Gus. He said, you can do it, Gus. The first time is always the hardest. The clock began to chime. 9, 10, 11, 12. They counted together. Oh my gosh, I've got to go, Hester said. I've never stayed up so late. Thank you for everything, Hester, Gretchen said. She and Hester gave each other a big hug. Gretchen went to bed and lay quietly in the darkness. She thought about the next morning, all about the townsfolk gathering, the TV cameras and the crowds, the blaring of the band. She turned on the light and wrote a few lines on a piece of paper and put it in the history box. Then she closed her eyes and fell asleep. Gretchen's dreams were peaceful. She was awoken by the sound of voices and the squeaks of the band tuning up. She put on her coat and her muffler, her boots and her mittens, and she took a deep breath. You can do it, she whispered to herself. Then Gretchen Groundhog flung open the door and stepped out onto the February morning. And what do you think happened? Do you think she saw her shadow? Let's take a look back here. You get to fill in the answer yourself on that story. So Gretchen was a little nervous, wasn't she, about her big job, but she summoned up the courage and she did it. And I wonder what happened. I think it's different almost every year. And I wonder what will happen on February 2nd for us this year. Will we have 6 more weeks of winter? Will the groundhog see its shadow? Just have to wait and see. Let's take a look up here at this poster. Let me move you guys a little bit here. There we go. It says, what makes a shadow? A shadow is the dark shape you see when something blocks the light. So here you can see the dog, and here you can see the outline of his body, which is his shadow in the snow. Do you see what's shining on him? It takes light, and in this case, it's light from the sun shining on the dog. His body is blocking where the light would shine on the snow right here, and that makes a shadow. Let's take a look over here. This looks like a fun summer day, doesn't it? Can you see the top one? Let me move you guys a little closer. Sorry, it's wobbly. There you go. It says, make your shadow move. These kids are outside jumping around on a beautiful sunny, what looks to be summer or spring day because there's a lot of green grass. And they're dancing around in the shadow. You can do that too. You can do that in the wintertime, sure. This friend made blocks. They made a block tower, and there's some type of light shining from behind it, perhaps a flashlight, and they're making a block shadow. And can you see these friends down here? He has his dinosaurs. I know we have some friends that love dinosaurs. And they're tracing the shadow made by the light on a piece of paper. That's kind of a fun thing to do too, with shadows. So maybe you guys can do some of those activities at home. I'm going to move you back so I can read another story. I know it's wobbly. Sorry, friends. Maybe you guys could do some of these activities. If you have a flashlight at your house, and maybe you have a bathroom or a small room that you could go into, and you can put the flashlight and shine it on your hand and see your hand on the wall and see if it gets bigger or smaller as you move it to and away from the light. Check it out. It's a fun thing to do. Now I want to read to you a book called Bear Shadow. And we've read stories with this guy before. This author is Frank Ash, and he has a lot of little bear stories that are always really fun. The last one I think we read was Mooncake, when he went up in what he thought was a rocket ship and had snow for the first time and thought it was pieces of the moon that he was eating. So let's see what this one's about. Bear Shadow. One day, Bear went down to the pond with his fishing pole and a big can of worms. While he was putting a worm on his hook, he looked down and saw a big fish. I'm going to catch that fish, thought Bear to himself. Can you see Bear fishing here? Can you see his shadow? Yeah. But when Bear stood up to throw his line in the water, his shadow scared the big fish away. Go away, Shadow, cried Bear. But Bear's shadow would not go away. Okay, said Bear. If you won't go on your own, then I'll just have to get rid of you. And he put down his fishing pole and began to run. He ran around the pond, and when he got to the other side, he kept on running. Do you think he's going to be able to run away from his shadow? Do you see what's up here? Let's see. He ran through the fields of flowers. He jumped over the brook and hid behind a tree. Good, thought Bear. Now Shadow can't find me. But do you see Bear there? He's hiding in the shadow of the tree, isn't he? But Bear was wrong. When he stepped out from behind the tree, the first thing he saw was Shadow. Nearby was a cliff. Bear walked over to the cliff and looked up. I will climb so high that Shadow won't be able to follow me, thought Bear. Bear climbed higher and higher and higher until at last he pulled himself all the way on the top, huffing and puffing. Whew, he smiled with pride. But when he looked down, look what he saw. Shadow. Now, Bear was very annoyed, so he went home and he got a hammer and some nails to nail his shadow to the ground. That silly Bear. He hammered, and 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 no matter how many nails he hammered, he could not nail that shadow down. I can't nail him down, thought Bear, so maybe I can bury him. He got his shovel, and he dug a hole, and when the hole was deep and wide, he let his shadow fall into the hole. What do you think will happen, friends? Then Bear filled the hole with dirt, and when he was finished, it was almost noon. The sun was high in the sky, and Shadow was nowhere to be seen. At last, sighed Bear, no more Shadow. But you know what's interesting about this? See where the sun is? Right over top of his head. So when that happens, the shadow goes right under him so that he can't see it. But now Bear was very tired. So he went inside and he took a little nap. While he slept, time passed, and the sun, once again, cast shadows everywhere. When Bear got up and opened his door, he saw his shadow on the floor. "Not you again!" exclaimed Bear, and he slammed the door, hoping to lock Shadow inside. But Shadow was too quick. Sighed Bear. "How about this? If you let me catch a fish, then I'll let you catch one too. Nod your head like this if it's a deal." And when Bear nodded his head, Shadow nodded too. So Bear went back to the pond and once again threw his line into the water. But this time, the sun was in a different part of the sky, which made it very easy for Shadow to keep his part of the deal. Do you see where Shadow is? Now the sun is in a different spot, so Shadow is behind Bear instead of over top of the water. And when Bear caught that big fish, Shadow caught one too. I just love these stories about little Bear. I always think he is so cute and clever and sort of silly. So I don't know if we're going to get that kind of sun where you can do the same type of exploring where you can go outside in the morning and see your shadow in one place and go back to the same spot in the afternoon and see it someplace else. If we don't get it tomorrow, though, one day try that. Go in your driveway, maybe when there's no snow, in the morning, and if you have some chalk or a brother or a sister or a mom to help you, or a dad, or a grandma or a grandpa, whoever you might have to help you, have them trace your shadow and where it is in the morning. Then put an X where you're standing. Then go back to that same exact spot in the afternoon and see where your shadow is. And you'll see, because the sun has moved, which is the light, your shadow too will move. So I hope you enjoyed learning about shadows, Groundhog Day, and our friends Gretchen and Bear. And I will see you all soon.